Liz Mueller, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks so much, Peter. Happy to be here.
So I hear you're the co-founder, CEO of a nuclear waste disposal company. Tell us more about that.
Yes, and it's an interesting question because I never would have thought I would be in the nuclear industry, let alone the nuclear waste disposal industry. But I got into this from the angle of climate change. And I believe we need nuclear power if we're going to really address climate change in a significant way. And nuclear waste disposal is one of those barriers still. People say, is nuclear really clean? How can it be clean if we don't have a disposal solution for the waste? And while I think there's lots of arguments that nuclear is clean, even if you don't have a waste disposal solution, the waste is very small, it can be safely stored. Part of me is also saying, well, why don't we just dispose of it? Why have we kind of given up on the disposal solution? And I think that is a problem that is solvable through innovation. And it's actually a very exciting place to be.
Awesome. So you use the magic word, which is innovation. How are you guys innovating that's different from, say, how people have done it in the past?
So there is a consensus on what you need to do with nuclear waste disposal. It needs what's called deep geologic isolation. So that means it needs to go deep underground, where things don't change over periods of millions of years. Nuclear waste is potentially dangerous for very long time frames. You can't shoot it into space. You can't dump it in the ocean. I mean, these are things that people always raise, but there's a number of concerns over those options. The consensus, it needs to go deep underground. The problem with that is that historically, the only way people have thought about deep geologic isolation is in the context of a mined repository. And a mine is a very big engineering endeavor. It's hard to do, it's very expensive, costing billions, potentially even hundreds of billions of dollars to build such a repository. And it's very difficult to find a location to build a nuclear waste repository that can take a significant amount of waste and making it worth the cost and the expense. So the status quo, and I should add, nobody's actually ever put high level nuclear waste or spent nuclear fuel into a mined repository. So there hasn't been the biggest track record of success. The Finns and the Swedes are getting pretty close, but nobody's done it yet. What we're doing is we're recognizing that you can do deep geologic isolation without all the expense, without all the controversy of picking a single location and then bringing all of the waste from a country to that location. You can do, just as we're having small modular reactors, you can have small modular repositories that can be located almost anywhere. And you do this, of course, by removing the humans from underground. So you use directional drilling techniques that have been adapted over the past few decades from the oil and gas industry and allow you to go really deep, really safely. You can mine out plenty of space. You're taking advantage of the fact that nuclear waste is so compact that it'll easily fit in a borehole. And that's really where the innovation comes from.
Got it. So we could thank the oil and gas industry for a few things. I always like to point that out because there's been a lot of innovation from the oil and gas industry that can be applied to other industries. I'd love to dig into sort of where you guys are as a company in your life cycle. Have you guys raised capital, outside capital, Series A, B, C, and where are you guys in your commercialization life cycle?
Yeah, we have raised capital. So we're about 7 years old now as a company. We're past Series A, but we're at a really interesting point where we have significant revenue now. So while we are still raising money and we're probably going to continue raising money, we don't necessarily need to raise money anymore, which is really nice. The work that we're doing is still in the pre-disposal space. So we do have contracts with governments around the world, as well as a number of advanced reactor companies, reprocessing companies, and other groups that are creating nuclear waste to handle their waste, to study, to determine how we can dispose of particular nuclear waste inventory in a particular rock formation. So that work is ongoing, and we have not yet gotten to the point where we're actually disposing of waste at any given location.
Got it. Well, first of all, congratulations on the revenue. That's amazing. And congratulations on being 7 years old and actually making things happen in the nuclear industry because it's traditionally an industry where things take a very long time. And congrats in being in a place where you don't necessarily need the capital, because as an investment banker, we see that when companies don't need capital, it tends to be when investors want to invest. Sort of an interesting paradigm there,
Yeah.
but very much congratulations on that. And I'm curious to know, what do you think is sort of the next step, or what is the path to getting to where you're storing, and how long do you think it'll be?
Yeah. We've always said the challenge is getting the first country or the first organization to sign up and to do it. And once we get one, we're going to get the second one, we're going to get the third one, we're going to get the 100th one, I think relatively quickly. So we're still working towards that first one, but we do have quite a few now companies and governments around the world who have made real progress and real, I'm not going to say confirmed commitments, but less than that, but who have expressed real interest in the solution and are exploring it in a serious way. I don't know which one of those is going to end up being first. I do suspect it's likely to be in Europe, given the way that things are going right now. The US is a remarkably complex environment for nuclear waste disposal. So, unfortunately, even though we are a US company, even though we've received quite a bit of support from the US Department of Energy, I don't expect that the US is going to be first, at least not for commercial waste. There are other types of waste that we might be able to handle in the US. But in Europe now, they have a new taxonomy that says that nuclear power is green as long as it has a waste solution, specifically by 2050. And so we're seeing now a lot of countries, particularly given the war in Ukraine and instability over energy sources, there's a lot of interest in nuclear power right now. And that's combined with this need to have a waste disposal solution from the get go, right? So it's not you build the nuclear power and you generate the waste and then you leave it for the next generation to figure out what to do with it. They're trying to be more responsible and figure out that waste solution before they build new nuclear power.
Absolutely. And I know with the challenges from energy through Ukraine, that different types of energy solutions have become so paramount. And I know that France, for example, has a lot of nuclear power plants, and they were exporting a lot of power to Germany. I don't know if they still are. So maybe talk from a political standpoint, why it's so important for countries to embrace nuclear as a solution if they want to get to net zero.
So I just don't see a path that doesn't lean heavily on nuclear power. I also lived in France for much of my 20s. And so in France, nuclear is just what is. Nobody really questioned it. It was just taken for granted. And it was really on my return to the US about 15 years ago that I was increasingly frustrated. Why isn't the US doing more with nuclear power? What's wrong with us? Why don't we recognize how important this is? And it was, and I think still is, this unsolved nuclear waste problem that is the barrier.
Absolutely. And of course we have a lot of NIMBYism here, I think, in the United States. I hope that nuclear will be, say, like NASA, right? They kind of went on a hiatus, and then private companies really initiated a
Yeah.
lot of innovation, with, for example, SpaceX. And now we're going to outer space, and we've seen a real growth in the space industry now in terms of venture-backed startups and opportunities. And we're starting to see it in nuclear. I'll give a shout out to a company called Oklo, backed by a company that, by a venture capital firm we know quite well. We try to not to mention any names, but great company. I'll give a shout out to a friend of mine who, I got into the energy industry in the gas turbine space. And the brightest engineer at that company is now working at this company, Oklo, in the nuclear space. And they made an announcement. I think Sam Altman is going to take the company public. So we're excited to see that unfold. Maybe mention some other companies you're seeing in the nuclear space, or developments and investors that are looking at the nuclear ecosystem.
Yeah, it's a really exciting space right now. So there's advanced reactor companies, there's small modular reactor companies, And there's dozens of them. I mean, that's what's so exciting. It's not like there's just one or two. I mean, there's a whole ecosystem that is developing. They are getting built. I mean, it's a little slow still in the US and Europe, but it is making progress. And then there's also reprocessing companies. So groups that are taking waste and other forms and turning it into fuel, reusing the fuel. They still do have waste, so we also partner with those companies as well. And then there's the use of heat that can be used. So it can be energy generation, power generation, and it can also be used for chemicals and many other exciting uses.
So you're out in California. I know you said, are you in the Bay Area?
I am in the Bay Area.
You know, the Bay Area, of course, is known for tech and all these things, but are you seeing other energy startups in the startup ecosystem in the Bay Area?
So there are some. I think one thing that's really interesting now is that it's not always obvious where a company is based. So I'm here in Berkeley, and pre-COVID, we had our headquarters based here in Berkeley. But now we're global, and we really are, and we don't have fixed office anymore. We have employees in the UK, we have employees in Washington D.C., in Philadelphia, in Texas, in Oregon, Washington State. So really, that I think has been a significant shift from being singly located companies to being distributed companies where you can get the best talent from all around the world.
Amazing. And how many are you guys now?
We're about 35, maybe close to 40.
Wow, I think companies are probably the funnest in that stage. You just got a great group of people. I'm sure you know a lot of them really well, and others maybe just a little bit, but it's great to have a group like that. Do you guys ever all get together?
We do. So the groups. So we made an acquisition a couple of years ago of Freestone Environmental Services. So they're based near the Hanford site in Washington, and the work that they do is very complementary to the work that we do, which is one of the reasons we wanted to bring them in. But it's also a little bit different, and so we frequently, when we get everyone together, we do it with the Freestone team, and then we also have separate get-togethers for the core deep isolation team.
Nice, nice. M&A. Tell me about, like, how did you guys come across that and then go to make the decision to do that? You don't see a lot of companies your size executing on an acquisition. It's another congrats.
Yeah, thank you. I think it came about because there are so few companies in the nuclear waste disposal space. And we were getting a lot of questions about our history. Could they really trust us with this multi-million dollar contract when we were a brand new company that had only been around for a couple of years? And by making an acquisition, which was a very strategic fit with Freestone, which is a great company, it answers those questions. So it gives us the history. It gives the ability to say that we've done similar work dating back 20 years or more. And so that's been helpful, as well as being able to draw on their expertise. So their specialty is site characterization, but they've also done a lot of work on permits and regulations. And all of that is a huge boost to the work that we are doing and the work that we're going to continue to be doing.
No, very good. And I'd be crazy as a finance guy if I didn't say, how did you finance the acquisition?
They understood the value of the growth market that is deep isolation. And so, Freestone is a company that's been around for a while and they are growing, but their growth is sort of marginal in its potential. Whereas deep isolation, we have massive growth potential. Every disposal contract is going to be worth approximately $1 billion. And there are hundreds of locations around the world that need what we offer. So they were very excited about the upside. We were excited about the history and the skills. And so we managed to make it work without much outside financing required.
Got it. No, those are the best kind. And, I think we uncovered something pretty awesome here. Your market potential is enormous. I didn't realize that a disposal contract would be over $1 billion into the multi billions.
Yeah, it depends on the size of the contract. So if you're looking at, we say, if you're looking at two reactors, so two existing reactors, full size reactors, the amount of money that has either been typically put aside or at least is on the books for eventual nuclear waste disposal is about $1 billion per reactor. So that's over the lifetime of the reactor. Now, our solution is significantly less expensive. So we're looking at a third of that, but we're typically saying about $1 billion per site. Again, because we're primarily, at least initially, looking at modular sites rather than having one single site that takes all the waste from everywhere.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And you're saying there's hundreds of potential sites. So your total addressable market is in the hundreds of billions. Is that fair to say?
Yes, that's correct.
Amazing. And we hope there'll be more sites, right? Because if we're going to get to net zero, as
Right.
these small modular reactors catch on, then you guys should have even more sites to take advantage of.
Yeah, that's correct.
I do always like to say, what about competition? Are there others out there trying to do this? If you don't want to mention any names, you don't have to, but I'm curious if you guys have a little bit of a moat maybe around your IP that gives you a long run competitive advantage.
Yeah, so there's not a lot of direct competition. Our real competition is the we're going to store the nuclear waste and figure out disposal at some point in the future group of or mindset, or sorry, do nothing mindset, I should say.
Well, that doesn't count, not competition.
Well, but it is. It's difficult
Yeah.
to to answer that. And the way that the industry has historically thought about nuclear waste disposal is in 50 to 100-year timeframes. So they will make a plan to have a design sometime in the next 30 years that could be implemented 100 years from now. And that historically, that might I'm not gonna say whether it might have passed. They might have been able to get away with that. What's different now is the imperative because of climate change and the need to expand nuclear power. So we're seeing a tension there between people who have been in these positions for a really long time and think about moving in decades, and people who wanna move more quickly because they feel like this is an important part of addressing our climate responsibility. So we are seeing a tension there, but that's our biggest competition, really. There aren't a lot of companies out there even offering mine repository services. So that maybe is the closest direct comparison. So back to what I was talking about at the beginning, big underground tunnels that can be used to dispose of nuclear waste. The borehole solution, we're really the only one offering it. And that means that we've had a 7-year head start. So our patent portfolio is very impressive. We have 68 patents that have issued already and another 67 that are pending. And as we've grown, we've kind of stopped counting and we've started combining multiple inventions into one single patent so that we can save money. So, yeah, I think there's a pretty significant moat for us at this stage.
Amazing. So great to hear. So I think a good subject to delve into is just where you see nuclear, like, let's say 30 years from now in terms of energy transition. I think a lot of folks are saying, try to play too short term and say 5 years. What's going to happen in 5 years? But energy takes longer. And I think, Bill Gates in his book really outlined that. That's why they've started to create pools of capital that are 20 years and even unlimited, amount of time they can take. So where do you see, 30 years from now, nuclear, and where will we be in energy transition by then?
I mean, I think 30 years out, we are going to have a lot of nuclear power. I think it's going to be a very significant source. I think people will recognize how good it is, how clean it is, how much it can be, and how safe it is. I think with nuclear waste, we're sort of ticking off the last unchecked box for nuclear to succeed. I'm also optimistic about other solutions. I would, I do believe that solar and wind are great. I'm open to fusion. Like, I would love to see fusion. I'm not sure how soon it is and if we're gonna get there even 30 years out, but I think it has great potential. So it's hard to predict where we're gonna be 30 years into the future, but I definitely think nuclear is gonna be a huge part of it.
Totally agree. Totally agree, Liz. What do you do when you're not running the company?
Oh, I do so many other things. I love running the company, but I also love spending time with my kids. I have a 10-year-old, I have a 14-year-old. They're tons of fun. I dance. I've actually started teaching dance recently on Saturday mornings. So that's a lot of fun. I read a lot. So yeah, lots of other interests.
I see all the books behind you there. What kind of dance do you do?
So what I've been teaching now, it's called rhythm and motion. And what I like about it so much is it's so many different types of dance. So it's a bit of modern, it's a bit of hip hop, it's a bit of African, it's a bit of Latin. And as the dance teacher, I pull from an existing library and put it all together and I go out and teach class.
That sounds super fun. I just learned how to do the foxtrot for my wedding,
Uh,
and I was able to execute it. That was the biggest worry the entire time leading up to the wedding. Once it was over, I could have a good time. But boy, to try and learn it, it really gave me a respect for how difficult it is to dance at even a low level.
yeah. And how much joy it brings too. I think in some ways, we've lost when you focus so much on the technique, you lose some of the joy. And I think that what I like to do is bring back that joy. And, all levels welcome. We don't care if you mess up, but just come and share the joy of the music and the love of everything that we do.
Awesome. Well, we call the podcast Energy Superheroes. You're definitely a superhero if you've got two kids in the house and teaching dance and running a nuclear company, which I think takes a lot of brain power. So amazing. Liz, it's been great having you on. Liz Mueller, thank you so much for being on Energy Superheroes.
Thank you so much, Peter.